Okay, hello once again. This is the next installment of my Box-R-Cyz series of melodeon videos, and this one is called Wild Arpeggios. Now, I'm particularly proud of this exercise. It's one that's helped me a great deal, maybe more than any other, maybe. Actually, this is going to be part one of potentially two parts, because this is such a big deal, this one, that it's probably going to be worthwhile to spread it over two videos, just so that it doesn't blow your mind. And to be honest, there's still some stuff I need to figure out myself before I do the second part. Anyhow, for the first part, this starts out very, very simply. It's something that just about any box player will be able to get going with very quickly, but then it just expands and expands into something really, really massive. So the idea of this is to play a 1-octave arpeggio and then play another one and then another one, a different one each time, and just keep on doing that. Preferably you do it in time, and just keep it going and just get the feel of playing one arpeggio after another. And that's a really important thing, it turns out. It will teach you a great deal if you can do this. And there's some variations on it which will teach you even more, so you'll start to, without realizing it, learn about your right hand chording and all sorts of things, and your positioning, and it teaches you loads. So let's get going. Let's see what we can do. Right, I've zoomed in for a bit more clarity, and also I've dug out this, there we go, one of my old metronomes, one of the wind-up ones, as I think that this is going to be very useful for this particular exercise. I've set the little notch there to be at, it's about 96 beats a minute, which is going to be fairly leisurely. Make it slower if you like, but we'll start off slow just to make things clear. So if I set this off going, hopefully it will give me a nice steady beat once I put it on a flat surface. If you've not got a metronome like that, you could always use an app on your smartphone. And so now we have that running, we're going to start playing our arpeggios, and we'll start this very simply. We'll do a nice G major one, which is obviously just along the row there. So watch and listen carefully for the rhythm that I'm doing here as well. I'm giving myself a bit of space between each one. So here we go. 3, 2, 1. That's G and that's D. D major. Let's try a different one now. Let's try E minor arpeggio. Same buttons for the most part, apart from the end one on the outside row. So it's going to be back to the D, E minor, back to D, back to G, A minor, G. Now that's bottom octave G, top octave. Back to D. Now that's what happens if you're doing these big jumps, and that's why this is a good exercise, is to learn those jumps when you're doing the switch between octaves. So we'll try again. And so on. Let's stop the metronome. Okay, so you see there how it works. You play an arpeggio, you play another one, you play another one, you keep it all in time with a metronome, and so on and so on. To start with, if you just use the easy arpeggios and the ones that are close to each other, then the exercise is fairly straightforward. If you start changing octaves and jumping your hand around and doing the more difficult arpeggios, it gets more and more and more difficult. Of course, if you put the metronome up to a higher speed, it's going to get harder again, and so on. You make it as difficult as you want to, really. And so it's not just an exercise in learning the arpeggios, but knowing once you finish one arpeggio where to jump your hand to for the next one. And it's definitely cheating if you look down at your keyboard to find it. What you need to do is be able to feel where the next one is and have that knowledge of the keyboard so that you kind of know relatively where you're going. And that takes a bit of doing, really. One little tip is that if you were to play, say, a G arpeggio, and you knew that you were going to play the high G arpeggio next time around, when you get to the top of, try to remember that place in the world, that place against your keyboard, where that one was, because that's a place that you need to then move your index finger to next. And by knowing that, you're going to be much more accurate in hitting it. If you just sort of randomly move your hand there and hope for the best, the chances are it's going to go wrong, particularly just at that time when you don't want it to go wrong. So you need some sort of technique to track where you are on the keyboard by sort of referencing where your fingers have been and then moving them to there, and that gives you the ability to then jump about like that. And also remembering where the D button is on the outside in relation to where the G is on the inside, because they relate to each other, and so on. And all of that is going to help your ability to jump your hand around the keyboard when you're playing tunes and know where you're going. So that's one very good reason for doing this. Now, I suspect there's some of you at home thinking, I don't know any arpeggios, or I don't know many arpeggios. Well, I've thought of that, so this next bit is going to take you through the options that you've got on just a regular melodeon like this. Okay, so to be doing this exercise, you need a palette of arpeggios to work with. So here's a quick summary of the ones I suggest you sort of go with first, in the order of simplicity, really. So we already did G major, and we can do that in both octaves. So that's just along the row, each finger in turn. So that's the low octave one. The high octave one is exactly the same fingering, you just start up here. Additionally to that, we have the same thing, exactly the same thing on the outside row, which is going to give you a D major scale. There's the low one, and there's the high one, so that's 4 already. Now you get another 4 fairly easily by almost doing the same thing but pulling. So I start on the outside one here and do E minor, and this is same starting button, same thing. However, you don't play on that button, the E is on this next one, so you've got a gap there. And the same thing happens in the higher octave, so we start up there and go right to the end. Again with that gap, you can see the gap there on the video. A minor is very similar to that, but on the inside row. So we start here on the A and go there, another gap again, and then we get to that A on the top. And again, we can do that in the high octave, but there's a problem here. So we start on the A, we go, but then we kind of run out of buttons there. There's no A that we want to, because we miss it and there's nothing there. However, there is a push A on the outside row, right on the very end button, so we can use that one instead. Where are we? No, that's the one. It's a bit squealy on this instrument, but it is there, so we can do A minor, low octave and high octave, E minor, low octave, high octave, and D and G the same. So that's quite a lot of arpeggios you've got already. The next one to try is B minor, I think. This is probably the next easiest. We start that on the inside row on the 4th button and we push it, that's the B. This is all going to be a push, this one, but we actually need to use both rows to make this one work. So there's the B. And then the next one we need is going to be a D, and we're going to play that on the outside. And then the next one is going to be the F sharp, which again is going to be outside if we're pushing. And then finally we want the top B, which is back on the inside again. So that one's more complicated in that we're using buttons on both rows and then not immediately next to each other. But on the positive side, it's a very nice, easy finger position to do that one. So there's nothing particularly difficult once you figure out where the buttons are. Also, that's the low octave one. You can do exactly the same scale with exactly the same finger positions in the octave above. So instead of starting here, we start here, and then the same thing. It's a very high note at the end there. Dogs like that, I guess, but yeah, it's not nice to hear. But if you've got an instrument with a low voice as well, that will be much more palatable, I think. So that's another one. It's a bit more complex, but it's not really too difficult once you find the position. A bit more difficult again, we can do, well, we played A minor arpeggio before, we can do A major as well. But this one, this needs both rows again, and this one needs quite a big stretch to get from the A note, which it starts on there, to the C sharp, which is right over there. So that's kind of a big one to get used to when you're over there. And then once you've done the C sharp, you stay on this same row to get the E, and then you go back inside to get the last A. So that's a fair bit more difficult than the ones we've done so far. You've got to get that stretch right, and it's easy to mess that up. And that gives you A major. Another one that you can get is C major, and this one uses exactly the same pattern as A major, but just moves everything along one button. So instead of starting on the 3rd button, we start on the 4th one, but then we do relatively the same thing. So that's got that long stretch there. So that's another couple of arpeggios we've got. And then the final one I'm going to mention is the hardest of them all, in my opinion, and that is going to be F sharp minor. That one starts in the low octave on the 2nd button. And this one has got a horrible stretch. Now this stretch happens not on the first 2 fingers, but these two. So it's going to be, which is all right, but then the next note is right over here, and you're going to do that with your 4th finger. And then the final one is with your little finger on the inside, which is awkward as well. There. And you can also do that in the high octave, which is going to start over here somewhere. There we are. And it's going to be much the same pattern, but just higher up, and just as awkward, to be honest. Now, with this one, there is a cheat. If this is just too difficult to do cleanly, especially if you're going fast, there's another option. It's the same buttons, but what you're going to do is you're going to play the F sharp with your index finger, and then you're going to slide your index finger along one button to get that next note, the A, and play it with that one, and that then brings you much closer to the C sharp that you need next. And you'll probably find that a lot more comfortable, but you do get that kind of nasty jolt between, because you can't get that very smooth if you wanted that to be smooth. So it depends. Neither way's perfect. Maybe I just need to do more practice on, but it feels like that's never going to be very easy. Right, okay, so we've now got a selection of arpeggios that you can use for that exercise. However, you may have noticed I've just changed melodeons. This one's looking rather more woody, and the reason I've got this one out is just to show you that some melodeons have extra low notes down here, and if they're in the correct configuration for it, that will give you a whole load more arpeggios to play with. So this one can do a very low G major or A major or A minor, which is actually a lot easier than the higher up A minors, to be fair. We could do a B minor, and with the same buttons but pulling, we're going to get a C major, and then, well, we're back to the D there, as we did before. So that's some extra ones you could do if you've got an instrument that's set up like that. Some instruments have low notes, but then a different configuration again, and then the options are different, obviously, with that. So there we go. We've got lots of arpeggios now, so we could do what we were doing previously, but there's some more options as well, and I'll give you a couple of them now. One of them is to use that space we had between the arpeggios previously to put in an extra arpeggio, the same one, just so we do each one twice. So instead of it sounding like, there we are, instead of sounding like that, we're going to do each one twice. So, and so on. That's harder because when you get to the end, you've got less time to think about the new one that you're just about to go to. So yeah, it's trickier. Another one that you can do is the same thing, but only just do each one once, so it's goes much quicker. That sort of thing. That was a bonus extra one. But the final one I was going to show you, I was intending to show you, is to go back to the pattern we had to start with that extra gap in it, and at the end of that gap, on the fourth beat in the bar, instead of just playing the single note, we're going to play the first and second and third notes in that arpeggio, or first, third and fifth in the scale if you want to be technical. We're going to play those all together, so it's going to sound like this. We're going to go like that. Oops. And so on. Why do we do that? Well, inadvertently, we've started playing right hand chords. Playing those three together is a chord, and it's the chord of the arpeggio, if you like. So instead of G major arpeggio, we have G major chord. And those chords are something you can certainly and very effectively incorporate into your playing, just as you can include arpeggios if you want to. So that's a very sort of sneaky way of getting you to learn your right hand chords by starting out with the arpeggio first as single notes and then putting them in. So any of the arpeggios you've learned, you can just use that technique to use the first three notes of it, play them together, and then you've got a chord. So let's think, the F sharp minor one, there we go, that was a tricky one to do. So the first three notes of that, you can play those together if you've got big hands. There's your F sharp minor chord. Or you can cheat, use those two together and use your little finger on the higher one instead of that one. And that's a bit more comfortable. So there's nothing wrong with doing that either. So there we go. There's plenty more where this can go, and as I said earlier, I'll probably do a part 2 which explores this some more. There's lots more to think about, but for now, randomly playing arpeggios one after another in time, that's going to teach you loads. It helped me a lot. I know things have improved greatly since I started doing that regularly, so hopefully that would help you as well. Cheers for now. Hope you enjoyed it. Where's my book?